Nets fans, we made another playoffs. That's 2 years in a row. 5 times since we've come to Brooklyn. We're becoming a winner. We're becoming a winning team. It's playoff time. Let's talk about it, Brooklyn. We are the Front Office Podcast. What up, everybody? My partner Sam is in the building. Sam, say hello to the good people.
Nets Nation, and anyone else listening, including the jealous Knicks fans. How we doing?
Better than the Knicks fans, I can tell you that for sure. But you know what? I like what's happening to them. They're very just humble and quiet. They're they're watching what the Nets were able to accomplish with like a team that on paper must look worse than their regular season team that they threw out there. But that the play-in bubble week gave us surprising basketball that's giving us playoffs in the 7th seed, which I did not at all think what was going to happen. Like, give me your really tight and small, rolled up version of what's happened in these last 8 games.
Look, I mean, like I think there's two quick sides to the coin. I think you can be on one hand really proud of the way they played and the way they competed. And all credit goes to the I think the 3-headed monster leader crew of Harris, LeVert, and Allen. And at the same time, I think you can also put a little cold water on it and realize that they beat like some teams that were playing half speed or weren't totally in it. But all in all, it's been an incredibly positive experience at Disney.
They represented.
Yep.
What I was angry about before the bubble started was just this complacency feeling, this thing that where, and I blame Kyrie a lot for this. The things that most people blame Kyrie for or hang on Kyrie, I don't. I only hang real things on Kyrie, and for me the whole let's start our own NBA. Why let's not play like I think the first thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about before we get to the Nets and what they did, but the bubble thing was just done flawlessly. If you're an activist type, you might look at what the NBA did as glad handing, as corporatized activism, which isn't real and has a phony texture to it. I couldn't care less. They put the problems of racial inequality and the way police are policing minority communities, on the forefront. And I think they did so much for the movement of just presenting to the world that this way of thinking is unacceptable. And I'm really, really proud of the team. I'm part of the reason why I'm like in a weird place with Garrett Temple is because him and Jacques Vaughn were excellent voices for our team in the sense of where we stand as a people against racial inequality and oppression in this country, and that was the first part of it. But the back of why these 8 games were so great. But the basketball, I'm a big Karis LeVert stan. Tell me what you think about how he played.
Yeah. So, by the way, I want to say one thing about the activism because I think what you just said was really eloquent. And the only thing I wanted to add to it is I think what's awesome about what the NBA did is I think for all the talk that everyone had about how this was going to take away, I think if anything, what the NBA did with this tournament and with the jerseys and with the different commercials, if you're watching a game and all the other.
Oh my God! Excellent point. Excellent point.
That's come out. Like they've also completely normalized putting social issues at the forefront of and being used simultaneously with a sporting event, which for when Kaepernick was doing what he was doing, and this isn't to go down a whole Kaepernick road, but
Yeah.
even though to most of us we thought what Kaepernick was doing was like totally normal, and when he was expressing his First Amendment right, like a lot of people thought like, oh wow, this is so radical. Meanwhile, the entire NBA just basically did exactly what Kaepernick did, and I think now if we see it again, it's not going to seem crazy at all.
If anything, the NBA kept the conversation alive because the protests were dying out, and like anything in our society, we start worrying about the next thing, which is who's running and for election in November. But I like I said, for someone like myself who I'm a dad, and when you're a dad, it automatically like throws water and makes some of your more militant and more activist tendencies in nature to calm down. But I watch it in my children, and I watch how inspired and top of mind some of these things are because of the way the NBA handled it. And I'm proud of our guys. I look at Karras and I go, Karras is probably not really a militant guy. He just seems more of the kind of easygoing, like, smart, I do what I'm supposed to do type of guys. Yep. But it gives Karras a way, even though that may not be his focus, and his focus is playing basketball, but a way to just actively keep showing that it isn't normal to be racist. And, because racists have been empowered, especially this last 4 years, and I won't get political, but this was tremendous from that standpoint. And also it was tremendous from a basketball standpoint because we learned a little bit about our core three. Tell me, before I start waxing poetically, tell me what you saw out there. Tell me what was real and what Nets fans should be really excited about that we saw in these bubble games.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I think what I'm already nervous about is, look, what Karras has done, and I think a lot of the analytics people like to say that, like a lot of these guys, if they're on their own, can score 20 or 30 points in a game, and like what he did wasn't that crazy, but like what LeVert did was for an 8-game stretch against good teams, and he totally put the team on his back. And this Nets team, I think because the Nets have been talked about so much, they've almost been normalized. But like the roster is atrocious. Like they're without 8 guys that they started the year with. They have a million G League guys. They have a million guys who are getting minutes who should never get minutes on a playoff team, let alone a team that may have like bigger aspirations than that.
The plan was to have Michael Beasley have some kind of renaissance, and he couldn't even play.
Exactly, and so like I give
Jamal Crawford. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, exactly. So on that note, like I give LeVert a ton of credit because I think he's done a really good job leading the team. And like, look, we can. I mean, me and you could talk for 6 hours about the way that he carved up Gary Trent and the rest of the Trailblazers because that was just an absolute show.
And it's disrespectful. And they were just calling Gary Trent like one of the stoppers of the bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been opening eyes. Karras ran up in him. It was just amazing to watch this kid play. But I think also you have to give it to Jared Allen.
Yep.
I'm watching a lot of hand wringing, and that's been my part of this where I can't even really enjoy being wrong because one, I thought this was a failure of a roster myself. Like that was an excellent point you brought up of, this was a garbage lineup, and considering the year that Rodions has had, like Rodions has had a confidence problem all year. And it was because Kenny Atkinson would send Rodi into games and basically, he's got to shoot threes. He's a lot of the time he was weirdly in a small forward position when he was bigger than the person playing power forward. Not that the person playing power forward has to be bigger than the person playing small forward, but it was just these odd ways that he would bring Rodion's out, and it never let Rodion show what he does and what he brings to the team, which is not the profile of most of the Nets on the floor. He's not a 3-point stretch four. He's a hustle player. He's a potentially super glue guy who doesn't have a consistent three, but can stretch the floor, can space the floor, because you can't leave him wide open to shoot it. And the guy brings energy. And what I saw was this in these 8 games was a real center emerge. And one of the bigger conversations that we're going to be having a lot is him versus DeAndre. I think after this playoffs, listen, after these 8 games, after these bubble games, I feel like we know who our starting center is. I think it's ridiculous having this conversation about him or DeAndre, and I even understand why Kyrie and KD want DeAndre to play, but they can't be sitting on their couches seeing Jared Allen play like this and not go, you know what? Maybe it's better that our 33-year-old friend comes off the bench and plays 20 minutes a game. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, Eve, I mean, this might go into one of our next topics, but I don't know if our friends Katie and Kyrie are watching these games based off of the lack of anything I'm hearing from them. It's literally radio silence on the only guy, and look, all the credit to you because you've been saying this entire time, this guy's a net, he's a net. But like Dinwiddie is the only guy that I've seen show any support for.
And Kyrie oddly, well, I'll tell you why Kyrie is not saying anything publicly. So I did see KD, say like something about Karras directly towards Karras, or a comment or something like that. It wasn't strong enough for my liking either. But that dry kind of like Karras telling everyone, Kyrie reached out to me and was proud. Like the way he put it across made it seem so fake and so PR. It didn't seem like Kyrie's my boy. He called me. He calls me after every game. That's what we do. He tells me little things. It didn't seem sincere at all, and I don't like it, man. Like, give me your take.
I mean, like, so this was. It's funny because the second the net game, the Trailblazer game ended, and just throughout the entire bubble, this has been, no pun intended, like bubbling up for me. And I kept on thinking back to you because you've rightly, and I'm going to eat some crow on this, have been more critical of Katie and Kyrie than I have. And I was just watching this team, and I was like, if you're like Katie and Kyrie, and you guys are both on a mission to silence whoever and to prove whoever. For KD, it's to show that he's like maybe one of the top 10 best guys ever. For Kyrie, it's to show that he can actually go to a team and have an overall really important, long-lasting presence. And like to watch these guys play their hearts out and just not really seem to care. And what ended up being the cherry on top for the entire thing was the Nets playing that game against Portland, and the game ends, and Durant uploads a photo of him dunking. So some people, including WFAN's Maggie Gray, and Mark Malusis, think that maybe it's Durant dunking because he's happy about the Nets or whatever. But instead, it was a picture of him dunking from the new Drake music video, and the notion that he was going to first of all, the poetry of him uploading a picture of himself from a music video at the exact same moment that the Nets just had like
an insane game, and Karras stepped up as a different, like that was a moment where when Damian